Shabbat Shalom. Have you ever contemplated the beauty of a pumpkin? To be perfectly frank, I haven't, despite the pumpkin's obvious good looks and stately manner. But I was prompted to do so after visiting the New York Botanical Garden this past week, where the artwork of Yayoi Kusama is currently on exhibition. Believe it or not, much of Kusama's stunning and highly evocative art is focused on none other than the pumpkin. A very quick aside, visiting the Botanical Garden during Sukkot was very amusing because everywhere you look, there are piles and piles of pumpkins and gourds lining walkways and playfully adorning entrances. And for a brief second, I thought these might have been an impromptu display for Sukkot. But no, these pumpkins and gourds were all particular to the Kusama exhibit, Sukkot notwithstanding. That being said, for Kusama, the pumpkin is a source of endless inspiration and artistic invigoration. Under her eye, this ostensibly mundane object soars with splendor and transcendence. Moreover, to Kusama, the pumpkin represents the epitome of natural design. It embodies stability, humility, beauty, and whimsy. As she explains, I love pumpkins because of their humorous form, warm feeling, and human-like quality and form. For Kusama, the pumpkin connects her to the mystery of the universe and the extraordinary creations we find here on Earth. With Kusama as our guide, the pumpkin, which was heretofore merely commonplace, becomes something almost revelatory, dancing, reaching, conversing. Kusama's pumpkins hold space with regal eccentricity. They are charismatic and electric, bold, and completely unexpected. These pumpkins take you by surprise in the most delightful of ways, reminding the viewer that nature is full of curiosity and wonder, if only we permit ourselves to see it. So often, a pumpkin is just a pumpkin. And like so much else in the vast scope of nature, on any given day, it inspires little to no amazement. In fact, its presence barely registers. Naturalist Diane Ackerman bemoans this lack of awareness and humanity's generalized disconnect from the natural world. In an article she wrote for the New York Times, Ackerman shares this anecdote. It was a spring morning in upstate New York, she writes, one so cold the ground squeaked loudly underfoot as sharp-finned ice crystals rubbed together. The trees looked like gloved hands, fingers frozen open. A crow veered overhead, then landed. Another life form curved into sight down the street. A girl laughing down at her gloveless fingers, which were texting on some handheld device. The sight is so common that it no longer surprises me, notes Ackerman. Though strolling in a large park one day, I was startled by how many people were walking without looking up, or walking in a myopic daze while talking on their cells. I worry about our virtual blinders. We're losing track of our senses and spending less and less time experiencing the world firsthand. To this point, Rabbi Lawrence Kushner retells a classic midrash about the splitting of the Red Sea. It begins, when the people of Israel crossed through the Red Sea, they witnessed a great miracle. Some say it was the greatest miracle that ever happened. The sea split, the waters stood like great walls, while Israel escaped to freedom on the distant shore. Awesome. But not for everyone. Two people, Reuven and Shimon, hurried along among the crowd crossing through the sea. They never once looked up. They noticed only the ground under their feet was still a little muddy, like a beach at low tide. "Yuck," said Reuven. "There's mud all over this place." "Blech," said Shimon. "I have mud all over my feet." And so it went. Reuven and Shimon whining and complaining all the way to freedom. For them, there was no miracle, only mud. Their eyes were closed. They might as well have been asleep. As we just read in our prayer book this evening, days pass and years vanish, and we walk sightless among miracles. So many of us walk through life blindly. We see the pavement at our feet, but we miss the trees which so proudly line the streets. We zero in on traffic lights, but we fail to notice the elegant sparrows perched atop of them. We may note the arrival of a bus, but we often miss nature's panoramic arrival of autumn or spring. The fact is, a great deal of our time spent outdoors is purely transactional, a mere backdrop as we move from point A to point B, rendering any scenery, no matter how spectacular, a hazy, unmemorable blur. But with so much on our minds and our to-do lists miles long, it's difficult not to give in to tunnel vision and to this hyper-focus on the infinite tasks at hand. But life is not merely a series of tasks to be completed. And furthermore, this endless, almost robotic march towards the future closes us off to the vibrant, spontaneous, and dynamic world bursting forth in our midst. On Monday, we began the celebration of Sukkot. This harvest festival draws us out of doors to commingle with nature, to encounter the world beyond our doorstep, to feel the fall air glide over our faces and the wind blowing in our hair. We awaken our senses as we take up the lulav, its variegated leaves rustling in our hands, its etrog emitting the most fragrant of perfumes. On Sukkot, we're commanded to spend time in our sukkah, eating, lounging, or cup of teaing. As such, our everyday rhythms are interrupted and our routines are shifted. We must remap our days to make room for the sukkah, for this daily detour lined in greens and gourds and fruit. The sukkah, however, doesn't lend itself to freneticism or haste. Rather, the sukkah dares us to stop, to sit, and to simply exist in the world outside our four walls, that we may hear the sounds we so often ignore. Birdsong, the whisper of a quiet breeze, the cricket's insistent chirp, that we may smell the scents we so often miss, freshly cut grass, blooming flowers, citrus and cedar, and that we may see the sights we so often neglect, the expansive night sky, the loveliness of a rose, the elegant simplicity of an apple or a squash, a gourd, or even a pumpkin. When I see pumpkins, shares artist Yayoi Kusama, I cannot efface the joy of them being my everything, nor the awe I hold them in. What if we could see the world the way Kusama sees pumpkins, with reverence and awe? Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel teaches that awe is an intuition for the dignity of all things, a realization that things not only are what they are, but also stand, however remotely, for something supreme. Awe enables us to perceive in the world intimations of the divine, to sense in small things, like pumpkins, the beginning of infinite significance. Kusama's exhibition at the Botanical Garden is called Cosmic Nature, a nod to the ways in which nature evinces glimpses of the divine, and a reminder that in seeing the world around us, we are surely seeing something more, something greater. Kusama notes the description consistently calls our attention to the patterns, connections, and cycles of living things that are not always visible. Her lifelong project is one of awareness and attunement to the mysteries of the natural world. This Sukkot, may we be inspired to keep our eyes open, to take in all that lies before us with a sense of reverence and awe. May we have the humility to recognize that every landscape and every object, no matter how magnificent or mundane, is part of God's creation, and therefore deserving of our respect, even admiration. And may we find joy in this continuous project of revelation as we discover and rediscover the world in our midst, realizing that every living thing can be for us as the pumpkin is for Yayoi Kusama, a beloved and endless source of meaning, of wonder, and inspiration. Ken Yehi Ratzon.